In this presentation, we'll look at the beginning of Things Fall Apart and how Achebe characterizes Okonkwo. Okonkwo is seen very much as a man who is conflicted. There's a sense of disconnect between himself. He feels a certain way inwardly, but he expresses this much different outwardly. In the beginning part of the book, Achebe narrates and says that Okonkwo ruled his household with a heavy hand. His wives, especially the youngest, lived in perpetual fear of his fiery temper, and so did his little children. Perhaps down in his heart, Okonkwo was not a cruel man, but his whole life was dominated by fear, the fear of failure and of weakness. It was deeper and more intimate than the fear of evil and capricious gods and of magic, the fear of the forest and of the forces of nature, malevolent, red in tooth and claw. Okonkwo's fear was greater than these. It was not external, but lay deep within himself. It was the fear of himself, lest he should be found to resemble his father. Even as a little boy, he had resented his father's failure and weakness, and even now he still remembered how he had suffered when a playmate had told him that his father was Agbala. That was how Okonkwo first came to know that Agbala was not only another name for a woman, it could also mean a man who had taken no title. And so Okonkwo was ruled by one passion, to hate everything that his father Unica had loved. One of those things was gentleness, and another was idleness. Much of Okonkwo's values are, of course, contrasted with the things that he saw growing up in Unica, his father's home. His disdain for his father is seen clearly in his love for masculinity, which Okonkwo associates with both power and wealth. This power is a physical power, for sure. He's known as a wrestler. He's seen as someone who thinks with his fists and not with his words. And this is also connected with his employment. As a yam farmer in his culture, this is a manly endeavor. This is something that involves standing against the elements of nature and producing prosperous things from difficult circumstances. And that's Okonkwo's MO, that he's taken difficult circumstances and he's made them himself. So when other people talk about their backgrounds and they talk about their fathers who gave them money and they talk about things that have gone their way, Okonkwo says, no one gave me anything, no one helped me, I have gotten where I've gotten totally by myself, totally on my own. And yet, of course, we see this conflict in him, that he's so chained by this masculinity, he's not able to express the things that he wants to express. Achebe shows us that he has a true love for Ikemefuna. He sees Ikemefuna, this captive boy who was here to make payment for a crime that was committed. He sees him as a surrogate son, one, in fact, that he almost has more respect for than for his own son, Nwowi. And yet, when Ikemefuna is murdered here in chapter 7, Okonkwo is the first one to rush in. Despite Ikemefuna, who believes that he's heading home, think about this for this poor boy. He's imagining being reunited with his mother, who he hasn't seen in 3 years, seeing his sister, who is grown now. He's excited, finally, to return to his house. And all of a sudden, he is hacked down by these men who have brought him out to the woods to kill him. He cries out in agony to his father, and Okonkwo drew his machete and cut him down. He was afraid of being thought weak. Achebe here is making a clear connection to the story of Abraham. Abraham is a patriarch of the world's major religions. You can find stories of him in Christian tradition, in Jewish tradition, and also in Islamic tradition. And the story is of a man who was called by God to be the father of a great nation, which was a surprise for Abraham because his wife and him were unable to conceive children. And at the time of the call, Abraham is an old man. And God says, come with me and I'll make you the father of many nations. He says, look at the stars of the sky. I'll give you as many inheritance as the stars of the sky or the sand on the seashore. And Abraham believes and follows God. And through this twisting and turning of events, finally, God answers his promise to Abraham and gives him a son who he names Isaac, a name that will be important for us later in this novel, Things Fall Apart. Soon after Isaac is born, God comes to Abraham and says, take Isaac, your son, your only son, and sacrifice him to me. Abraham is told to go to a specific mountain and there to make sacrifice of Isaac. God does this in these various traditions in order to test Abraham, to see if Abraham loves God more than he loves his son, if he loves him more than the fulfillment of this promise. So Abraham takes his son and takes him to this mountain, and he binds him, and he's ready to drive a knife through his heart when an angel comes and stops him from killing the boy and says, God is pleased with what you have done, and a ram is offered in place of Isaac. A different sacrifice is made. Of course, the differences between Abraham's story and Okonkwo's story are great. Abraham was called by God to do this thing. Okonkwo was specifically told by people, don't be a part of this, don't involve yourself in this. Abraham is thankfully spared from having to commit this horrible crime. Okonkwo willingly commits this crime. So as we come to the end of this section, we have some questions about how we feel about Okonkwo. And I would submit to you two possible perspectives. The first is perhaps the more natural one, to feel contempt for him and to say, well, this guy he's no excuse for his callous treatment of his family. Even so, he had a bad childhood, so his father was someone that he didn't respect. That doesn't excuse him murdering Ikemefuna. That doesn't excuse him beating his wives. That doesn't excuse the anger that he experiences. A more empathetic response is one of pity, to say he's shackled by this relationship with his dad. He has this very unfortunate view of masculinity that he can't break, and try as he might, he's stuck. He can't get past these things in himself. Maybe if he could, we'd see a different Okonkwo, but at this point in the novel, I would submit those are two rational responses to Okonkwo's actions thus far.